And I would now, of course, invite my colleague, first, Professor George Szell, to share his presentation.
Thank you, Amar, for this nice presentation. I would like to ask you to upload my PowerPoint presentation if you can. What I will talk about today, and probably in December as well, is to pour a little water into the wine you are presenting and giving to drink for us. Actually, I think the approach of regenerative ecosystems is one of the most promising approaches to sustainability in the world. And I was just reminding myself or remembering when you talked that a certain Murray Bookchin, I don't know who remembers him still, in the 1960s, he was an American activist from Vermont, and he phrased the issue as thinking globally and acting locally. And I think that's just the challenge we have to see. Well, I will see my own presentation to start with. And well, what I'm talking about today is overcoming challenges and obstacles for regenerative ecosystems. Well, for sure, since more than 50 years, which is the Club of Rome report, Limits to Growth, we had quite some progress in consciousness and awareness about ecological issues. And actually, at the moment, we have mainly the issue of climate catastrophe, I would say. It's not just the change, but it is the pollution, which is in the foreground of public debate. But we have to take into account as well that we have not only these two dimensions, but it's a depletion of resources, which that was the issue of the Club of Rome 1972, which includes the fishing in the sea, for example. It's forecasted that in 2040 there will be no fish in the oceans anymore if we continue the practice we do of overfishing. Well, there are 3 points I will make today, which is one, the challenges of policies and governance to sustainability and regenerative ecosystems, then the existing challenges and recommendations I will make. Apparently, it's impossible to consider in this short presentation all the elements and dimensions of regenerative ecosystems as presented by Amar Nayak. For sure, each element has its own history and different obstacles and challenges, different social actors and cultures. In this context, it is worthwhile mentioning that also to focus on the role of culture, or better saying cultures, as they are where the values are framed and transmitted. So, Amar, I think we should take it into your system approach, which actually culture comprises education as well as the science and different approaches. So the idea of regenerative ecosystem itself is a product of culture and perhaps a cultural change and approach. So starting with the point, I see what you have there. Okay, yeah, I see it. It's there. It is. And so perhaps you can put, yeah, fine. So the first point I made already. So we are right now at the point of, let's see, it's in myself. One slide before, please. Yeah, right. Okay, so the purpose of this contribution is to shed new light on the challenges and obstacles which prevent so far the implementation of regenerative ecosystems on a worldwide scale. The ongoing environmental catastrophe is the biggest challenge for humanity for survival in the coming decades, because the effects of this catastrophe are not limited to one country or region, or only on international cooperation, of which the IPCC is one of the best examples. It is necessary. The research builds on earlier studies, especially on democratic participation, the role of trade unions and cooperatives as counterpower against capitalist-driven destruction of the environment and with the basis of sustainable development. The paper covers in some way all tracks what you presented now. And I think it is this point I want to make strong, as you show in your examples on organic farming, for example. It is a local community on democratic structures which is able to transform the agriculture in a sustainable way, whereas big business, agribusiness, is still destroying the fundamentals of our system. So how to approach it? I think we need to start all available documents and data which are in different forms. And I think the local level, again, is very important. So NGOs are an important element of democratic participation. And so what I propose to do is look not only into the climate issue, but the mining issue. For example, we are in a paradox now that, for example, for getting rid of fossil burning for vehicles, for example, we produce batteries, again, in a non-sustainable way of exploitation of resources. And so water is the essence of life. And so its pollution, which is still going on, is definitely a big issue. And as I mentioned earlier, with the transport system, it is still the country, even European Union, tries to promote a more sustainable way of transport system, but we have to reconsider the complete system itself if individual cars are still to be allowed on the long term. And as you well presented, it's an interdisciplinary approach with only not what you mentioned, social science, legal studies, economics, biology, medicine, anthropology, agriculture, history, and media science have to be included. And I think what is important is that we need a critical social theory to cover all that, so which is able to criticize itself and its foundations, the scientific system, which also is dominated, especially in natural sciences, by big money. And also 1/3 of world war research is for the military, although I defend the Ukraine against Russia, but still it is an issue that this, all the military spending and destruction is one of the biggest challenges for a peaceful and sustainable society. So coming to the findings, next slide, please. So we have to take into account the massive attack by vested interests against the ecological turnaround in face of increasing ecological disasters. We see the floods, the typhoons, all that is increasing, and pollution of water is not stopped, already surpassing now today the threshold 1.5 Celsius of the Paris Convention from 2015. In some areas, for example, in Europe, the average temperature was already last year plus 2.3 degrees, and in the Arctic more than 5%. So the melting of glaciers, Greenland, Antarctica, will raise the sea level by 6 and 58 meters. So half of world population will be drowned if we continue like that within the next couple of decades. So before we can promote regenerative ecosystems, we have to designate and overcome the oppositions and the hindrances and look for supporters for our regenerative ecosystem approach. So next slide, please. Saying on the other side, lobbies, especially the agribusiness and the chemical industry, are softening environmental regulations. Even in Europe now, European Union was at the forefront of ecological modernization, ecological social modernization, but they paddled back recently, not to speak of the United States. Science and its institutions as universities and research centers are the main element for enlightenment since more than 500 years. That is why they are again targets of irresponsible economic interest in their organization, as Trump just destroys it in the US, but in some other countries as well. Even some scientists are corrupted and figured as merchants of doubt, promoting what Norbert R. Proctor, Londa Schiebinger, Americans, call agnotology, the science of not knowing. So to come to the end, what recommendation to Commonwealth nations can we formulate? Politics in general take an ambivalent role, especially populist leaders and extreme right movements attack science and provoke with it the end of the age of enlightenment. Against them are green parties and other progressive forces defending and supporting regenerative ecosystems. The media are ambivalent as well. Even traditional media are often owned by big companies and reactionary owners, Murdoch, Bolloré, so Fox News, for example. Even scientific journals are quite often biased by vested interests, so not publishing findings which are against their stakeholders. Unfortunately, especially social media play more and more a negative role through fake news and conspiracy theories. Enlightened media have to take a more active role in this combat, and science must take a more active role as a public institution in disseminating its findings more broadly and fighting disinformation. Education is the core strategy to overcome obstacles and challenges to regenerative ecosystem. And here, university have to play a foremost role. I think Pavel will come to the point later. So thanks for your interest.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor George Szell.